Counselor Threx stood in the middle of the great hall, surrounded by voices that talked too much but said nothing. He stared at the large hologram of the Milky Way galaxy, his eyes focused on one small fading blue dot. Earth, for the last 19 days. There had been no signals, no trade responses, and no diplomatic updates from the human sector. Not even background chatter. Silence. Threx had seen many strange things in his long career. Systems collapsing, civil wars, rogue AIs. But this was different. Humanity didn't just go silent. Humanity never went silent. He raised his hand to speak during the Council's daily session. "I believe something is wrong with Earth," he said. Too wrong to ignore. A few heads turned, others didn't bother. Counselor Jervik from the Dreelan species replied with a bored voice. "Perhaps they are simply updating their tech grid, or perhaps they're just being human." There were chuckles. Threx didn't laugh. He remembered the first time humans entered Council space. Curious, ambitious, sometimes chaotic, but always loud, always present. And now, nothing. He requested a surveillance report. It came within the hour. Satellite view showed Earth's cities still standing. No destruction, no war, no lights, no movement. Ships sent to patrol the Sol system found no resistance, but they also found no humans. The planet was still there, quiet, clean, cold. One drone entered New York City. The streets were empty, skyscrapers intact, homes untouched, but not a single sign of life. It was like the humans had simply walked out. Threx stared at the footage in silence. A park swing moved slightly in the wind. A screen blinked in the distance, waiting for a password no one would enter. Later that night, Threx sat in his chamber, staring at an old communication file. It was the last message Earth ever sent. No subject, no signature, just one sentence: "We waited long enough." He played it again, then again, and again. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, Threx returned to the Council. He told them what he found. Suggested an emergency investigation. No one agreed. Some said Earth was always strange. Some said they would return eventually. Others didn't care, but Threx knew something the others didn't. He knew silence was never a mistake. It was a choice, and it was already too late to stop whatever the humans had started. The Council returned to its daily business as if Earth's silence meant nothing. Reports were filed, votes were passed, and new treaties were signed with other civilizations. No one spoke of Earth anymore, except Threx. He sat alone in his private study, eyes fixed on the same message. "We waited long enough." The words repeated in his mind like a quiet warning. He couldn't let it go. Something about the message felt deliberate. Not just a farewell. It was a decision. Threx turned to old communication logs, files buried deep in the archive systems. Hidden within corrupted sound files, old Earth broadcasts, and music archives, he began to notice strange patterns, messages woven inside old songs, audio signals spaced at exact intervals, human voices saying things the Council never noticed. One voice stood out, calm, steady, recorded decades ago. "If this message is heard by anyone, we have made our choice. The stars no longer belong to a council that would rather control than understand. We'll find our own path." Threx leaned back, unsettled. The humans hadn't vanished by accident. They had planned this, not in months. In centuries. He pulled data from the human diplomatic database, most of it closed after their silence, but one document slipped through. A single line at the top read, "Project Departure." The more Threx dug, the more he realized how much the Council had missed. There were unregistered ships, silent construction in outer systems, and unusual trade requests from Earth over the last 50 years. Requests for rare metals, gravity stabilizers, and dark matter containment units. At the time, no one had questioned it. Now it made sense. They weren't building weapons, they weren't building defenses. They were building an escape. Still, Threx wasn't sure where they went. Space was endless. Even with the Council's tracking systems, humanity could be anywhere. Then something strange happened. A small scout vessel passing near the edge of the Orion border picked up a signal. It wasn't a distress call, it wasn't a warning, it was music. Old Earth jazz. But it was playing on a frequency that no ship used anymore. Attached to the signal was a single phrase. "The sky is quiet now. Just how we wanted it." Threx brought the data to the Council once more. Some laughed again. Some dismissed it as a leftover signal from an old colony. But one or two members didn't laugh this time. They began to worry. Quietly. Secretly. Because the signal was coming from outside mapped space. Beyond the galactic edge. And the technology needed to send such a clear signal from that distance was far ahead of anything the Council had approved for humanity. The Council still said nothing publicly. But behind closed doors, they started asking quiet questions. Where did they go? What did they take with them? And most importantly, what they plan to do next? For the first time in years, the Council's silence began to crack. 3 different trade routes near the galactic edge were interrupted, not by pirates or natural disasters, but by brief sensor distortions that no ship could identify. No attacks. No threats. Just a strange moment where systems went dark, and then came back online. Each time, crews reported seeing a strange silhouette in the distance. Large, silent, motionless, and gone within seconds. The Council dismissed it again. They always had an excuse. But Threx didn't need excuses. He needed answers. He pulled private reports from the lower sectors, places no one cared to monitor. And there it was again. Ships that didn't match any registered species. Ships with no insignia, no call signs, no engine trail, but always appearing after a failed sensor scan. They weren't attacking. They weren't hailing. They were just watching. One freighter captain described the sight in a low-quality transmission. It hovered behind a gas moon. No lights, no sound, like it was studying us. Then it vanished. Threx compared the description with old Earthship designs. Nothing matched exactly. But one thing was clear. The shape, the structure, the energy patterns were human. Just not any human technology the Council had ever seen. These weren't escape pods or emergency transports. These were deep-range vessels. Fast, quiet, built for exploration, or something else. He brought the findings forward again. This time, only a few Council members stayed to listen. One of them, Councillor Vela from the Cyrene species, said in a whisper, "If they've truly gone beyond the rim, then they've left our laws behind." Threx nodded. "And if they're watching, they might not want to come back." Meanwhile, at the edge of the outer systems, another anomaly appeared. A Council observation station, automated and unmanned, detected what looked like a fleet. Dozens of ships, formation flying. But when the signal reached the central relay, the feed cut off. Only one frame was transmitted before silence returned. DO showed a glowing symbol painted across the side of one of the vessels, a star surrounded by a circle, with a single word beneath it, written in Earth English. Free. That image reached Threx's eyes within hours. He knew what it meant. Humanity hadn't just disappeared. They had evolved. They didn't leave because they were weak. They left because they were ready. And now, they were watching quietly from a distance the Council couldn't follow. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The galaxy continued spinning. Planets continued their orbits. But in dark corners of power, quiet conversations began to rise. What had humanity become? And more importantly, were they building something greater? Or simply waiting? The mine rumors had become too loud to ignore. Across the Council's inner chambers, quiet whispers floated between the most powerful species. Not official discussions, not yet, but questions, worries, possibilities. It was no longer just Threx's theory. Too many small things were piling up, and the image was becoming clearer with every missing puzzle piece. The humans hadn't vanished. They had executed a plan. Threx sat in a dim archive room far below the main halls. He had permission to view Level 5 locked files, restricted to only a few dozen counselors. These were reports that had been submitted, ignored, and buried years ago. He opened one labeled Arc 1. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a weapon. It was a blueprint. The Arc program was not a secret weapon, nor an escape from war. It was a quiet project hidden under hundreds of harmless names: environmental ships, deep space scanners, research vessels, and colony support units. In truth, they were all parts of something far bigger, a silent, long-term plan to leave. Every part of it had been built within Council permission. Every request approved, every shipment logged, but no one had ever connected the dots. The Council had always assumed humans were too unpredictable, too emotional to build something this patient, this careful. They were wrong. Threx read through the logs. One phrase stood out across dozens of unrelated files. Departure is not escape, it is choice. Every line proved that the humans had been planning this for over a century. Slow, careful steps to ensure they could one day leave, not just the Council but the mapped galaxy itself. Not a rebellion, not a warning, just distance. Across the galaxy, the signs were everywhere, now visible to those who dared look. Whole sectors that used to report to the Council were now operating independently, using human-developed technology with no trace of origin. Energy signals in dark space hinted at hidden travel lanes. Even some non-human civilizations began asking quiet questions. Where did the humans go and could we follow? Even some non-human civilizations began asking quiet questions. Where did the humans go and could we follow? Threx presented the Arc findings to the small group still willing to listen. Most sat in silence. A few looked troubled. One of them whispered, "If they've built a new civilization, what happens when they no longer fear us?" Threx answered without emotion, "They never feared us. They just waited until they no longer needed us." On that same day, across a remote binary system, an observatory picked up a brief signal. It didn't ask for help. It wasn't even directed at the Council. It was a human voice speaking into deep space as if documenting a journey. It said, "System 43 stabilized. Atmosphere terraforming successful. Colony established. This is Home 3. Reporting status. No Council contact. As planned." The signal ended there. It didn't need to say more. They weren't lost. They weren't hiding. They had moved on. It began with a signal, short, simple, impossible to trace. It arrived in the heart of Council space, bypassing every security system. No alarm triggered, no firewall caught it. It didn't ask for anything, it only said, "Do not follow." It wasn't a threat, it wasn't even a warning. But it echoed through the Council like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Threx read the message again and again. There was no signature, but he didn't need one. He knew the tone, the choice of words, the unmistakable calm in the language. Humans had sent it. And they were making something very clear. They had no interest in returning, and they expected to be left alone. By now, even the most confident counselors had grown uneasy. The strange encounters, the sensor blackouts, the ghost fleets beyond. Known systems, they were no longer rare, and they were no longer being ignored. But the question no one dared to speak aloud was, what if humanity had outgrown the Council? Some races began quietly reaching out, trying to make contact with these new humans. They sent peaceful messages, gifts, even offers of alliance. None were answered. Instead, the next signal was even more unsettling. It came from deep space, transmitted through over 40 relay points in less than a second. Just a voice, not angry, not loud, just calm. We remember who listened. We remember who didn't. Threx froze when he heard it. The Council chamber fell into silence. Some members looked at each other, confused. Others looked down, ashamed. The Council had always assumed it would set the rules. That species joined the galaxy, followed the laws, and earned their place. But humanity had changed the game without asking for permission. They had rewritten their future without a single vote cast. And now, the galaxy felt smaller. Smaller because it was missing a voice that once filled the room. Smaller because it had realized something far larger now existed just beyond reach. Threx stood and addressed the chamber. They were never trying to conquer, he said. They were trying to grow, quietly, and we chose not to see it. No one argued, no one laughed, because deep down, they all knew. Humanity had simply moved on without them, and there was no guarantee they would ever look back. Far beyond the Council's reach, in a region of deep space untouched by any star's light, a strange structure floated quietly. It didn't glow. It didn't broadcast. It simply existed. Yet for something so silent, its presence was overwhelming. Massive in scale, invisible to most sensors and orbiting nothing, this structure wasn't natural. Its design was smooth, deliberate, almost elegant, unmistakably human. But, unlike any technology the Council had ever seen, it wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something new. Something meant to last. Inside the Council chambers, the debates had stopped. The questions were no longer about whether humans were gone, but what they had become. Smaller civilizations were quietly stepping away from Council oversight. Trade routes, once busy with regulation, now flowed through shadow lanes powered by human-built systems, faster, safer, and outside the Council's control. Threx no longer brought evidence. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Humanity wasn't hiding anymore. They were simply unreachable. And then it happened. One of the Council's deep space probes picked up a quiet message near the unknown structure. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a log, as if someone had accidentally left the mic on. A young voice spoke. We grew up hearing stories of the Council, their order, their silence. But now, standing here, I understand. It was never about fear. It was about waiting for the moment we could choose something different. The voice paused, and then came the words that would ripple through every corner of the galaxy. We didn't run. We evolved. And this is our future now. Within hours, images of the structure leaked. Scholars called it a Dyson fragment, a type of megastructure once considered impossible. A system built to sustain life, not for survival, but for independence. The Council issued no official statement, because what could they say? They had watched the silence. They had ignored the EE signals. They had underestimated the quiet species that once stood in their halls asking to be heard. And now, they were just observers, looking up at something far beyond their reach. Some counselors still hoped humanity would return one day, reconnect, rejoin. But Threx knew better. He looked to the stars, to the space just past the Council's longest maps, and understood something simple yet powerful. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had arrived, and now it was the rest of the galaxy that needed to catch up.